Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Social Change Career Series. I'm Thanera Bailey, President and CEO of the SISTU Group, and we're really excited to be kicking off this conversation with leaders who are sharing their career journey, whether that connects with social good or social change, and to tell us a little bit about kind of the path they've gotten into their current role. I'm joined by three members of my team. We have three interns who are going to be asking and connecting with our speaker today, who is Sally Ehrenfried from Blackbaud. And so I'd first like to just introduce the other individuals that will be directly connecting with Sally with me. First is Katie Hussey-Sloniker, and then Heather Mercer and Christian Kelly. I'm going to let them each do a very brief introduction, and then I'll speak a little bit more with Sally.
Hi, my name is Katie, and I currently live in San Juan, Puerto Rico.
Great.
Hi, I'm Heather Mercer, and I'm living in Spokane, Washington.
I'm Christian Kelly, and I'm living in Winchendon, Massachusetts.
So as you can already tell from the three locations that they shared, our internship program, as you may or may not know, is a virtual internship program. And one of the things that we're really interested in is preparing people for entering the social sector, whether that's in nonprofits or in corporations, to give them an understanding of the ways that they can make a difference. And today we're really excited to have Sally Ehrenfried joining us to share a little bit about her journey through public policy and working on the Hill, all the way to now working in South Carolina with one of the great corporations that provide software and services to the nonprofit sector. So Sally, thank you so much for joining us. And why don't you just do a quick introduction and tell us, who is Sally Ehrenfried?
Who is Sally Ehrenfried? Well, thanks, Thanera. It is an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation today. So who am I? Well, I am a CSR professional and have been for the last 7 years. I got my start in a small city called Lewiston, Maine, where I grew up, went to college, and then shortly after graduating from college, found myself with all of my worldly possessions packed into the back of a Ford Escort station wagon, and I was on my way to D.C. to start my career on the Hill. And I spent 13 years working in the United States Senate for 3 different members on both sides of the aisle, and really just had a great experience working on the Hill, working for these people, really sort of watching them firsthand truly embrace their roles as elected officials and what it meant to them to serve their constituents. I have to say, I don't know how many people remember their college graduation speakers. I happen to remember mine. It was Paul Volcker, when he was still chairman of the Fed, and the premise of his speech was all about public service. And I had an intention of going into public service after graduating, even though I hadn't quite found out that I'd gotten my first job yet. It was on that track. So I really felt that that conversation, or that speech that he made at my college graduation, was really to me, and it's the way I'm hardwired. Public service and giving back is just the way I'm hardwired. So, fast forward, after spending 13 years on the Hill, I moved to Charleston. I find a job at Blackbaud, which of course is all about helping nonprofits succeed through fundraising and financial management software and other software to sort of help them achieve their missions. And shortly after I was finishing up my master's degree, the company really started to look at how it interacted with its respective communities. What did that mean? How did it mean in terms of who we served and the market we represented? And so we really started to create a more robust corporate citizenship program. And at the time, of course, I was having conversations with my current manager about what did I want to do next. I was about ready to graduate with my MBA, and I wasn't going to be in the role that I was in with an MBA, so what was it? And I really expressed an interest in doing this. So to me, really being in this corporate citizenship type role, especially for a company like Blackbaud, is the best of both worlds. I get to do good every day, and I get to do it for a company that does good every day. And it really is just a great way to work. I mean, I don't really think of what I do as work, because it's just part of that, it's part of my purpose, it's part of my give back, is to do this sort of work.
It's so great to hear. And, the tool side, you worked on the Hill and had this long kind of time working on public policy, and then to shift and work in what people don't naturally connect to as social good is working at a corporation, working at a for-profit organization. But there's so many great things that companies do. We were talking right before we got started about many of the things that Blackbaud does in the community. So why don't you just share a little bit about what corporate social responsibility looks like at Blackbaud?
So the way that we focus our CSR is really, it's an employee-centric take on our corporate citizenship strategy. So we put our people at the heart of everything that we do, and we focus our programming around their service within their respective communities. So, we have our nonprofit leadership circle, which works with our people who either currently serve on a nonprofit board or committee, or who would like to. And one of my active roles is working with my colleagues at various locations across the U.S. and helping them find an appropriate board or committee role for them if that's what they want to do. And then through this nonprofit leadership circle, we then support the people who are in these roles to make sure that they can be the most engaged and the best board members that they can be. Our grant making and our corporate philanthropy puts our people at the center. So we have a program called our Community Matters Grants program, and wherever we have a physical location, these offices accept grants. We have a committee of employees that gets together, they review them, in some cases they go on site visits, and then they make the funding decisions. And I'm there simply as an advisor. I don't tell them who they have to fund. I don't say, oh, well, this is our focus now, you really need to go here. It's their decision. They're the ones who are in their communities day in and day out. They're the ones who understand the needs most. It's not me sitting in Charleston talking to a colleague in San Francisco and saying, well, we really want you to do this. That's not how we do it. It's very employee-centric. It's very much about the culture of that particular community and that particular office. And then one thing that I'm very excited, and you'll probably be surprised that we're just now launching this, is we just 2 months ago launched a matching gifts program. So Blackbaud now has a matching gifts program. We're working with our people on that. We have a new tool in our toolbox called Blackbaud Care Center, which helps us track employee volunteerism and giving. It's actually from our colleagues at MicroEdge. That's a company we acquired last fall. So we're using that to really expand and grow the different things that we do day in and day out from a CSR perspective. And then we also have a couple of grassroots employee groups like our Team Blackbaud, which is volunteering, our Green Bod, which is our Green Environmental Corps, and really everything we do is very, a lot of bubbling up from the bottom, and me and my team supporting the things that people are most interested in doing. And we're actually in the process, or I'm actually in the process of doing a comprehensive look at our STEM initiatives and what they look like and the different programs we have to support them, and figuring out ways that we can scale them in a way that makes sense for the company and for our people and our communities.
That's great. It's wonderful to hear of all the things. I love the nonprofit leadership circle. As someone who's worked in nonprofits for the majority of my career, so often I feel like our corporate board members are not always equipped or prepared to take on the roles of governance. And so it's great that you all are taking on that preparation role internally as kind of professional development for them before they go out.
Yeah, it is. It's very different. And one thing I think that we could all agree on is that there are some organizations in some ways that succeed in spite of their boards. But really, for an organization to grow and to thrive and to really achieve their mission, they need to have a high-performing, engaged board. And we really want our people to understand that, and to having them, since they're coming from us and our market is the nonprofit sector, we feel it's really important for us to make sure they have those tools to be that type of board member, and to understand that, yes, they're on the board because they have a passion for that cause, but they also have a fiduciary responsibility to that organization, and that is, really that is the most important part of their role, is that governance and that fiduciary responsibility.
That's great. So I did want to just pause really quickly and let people know that are watching us either through Google Plus or through YouTube that you can type a question, and we'll try to get to those later on for Sally. But I also want to take a step back, Sally, and just talk a little bit about your time on the Hill. And I know for many, young undergrads, that's a desire to kind of work on legislation or with their congressman, and maybe to be a part of shifting policy. But it's a huge kind of hurdle to get through. And so maybe just talk a little bit about the first steps. If someone wants to be engaged or enter working for their legislator, what might be some steps they should take?
First and foremost, it's if that is truly something you want to do, then sort of plug yourself into that political network in your home state, and in particular with a respective party. I know that, some people may not want to, pigeonhole themselves with a particular viewpoint or a view set, but when you walk into that Hill office, you check your views and your own agenda at the door. It becomes the agenda of the person that you're working for and the goals that they want to see happen within, their policy perspective. So did I agree with my bosses 100% of the time? No, I didn't, but I agreed with them probably 98.5% of the time. And that is one of the things that we saw a little bit of, is that people not really getting that in some ways you want to advise your member the best that you can. You want to strive to obviously be the best staff person you can, but really it's not your agenda, it's theirs. And you're gonna have to pick a side. So, we would get resumes in one office for a party that was different from ours, and you kind of you wonder why that particular person, and you look at who they've worked for, and your boss, and you know what you're doing, and you're trying to mix the two together, and it's just not working, and you really don't understand why this particular person who's worked here wants to come now and work for you on this side. So you really sort of have to figure out what you believe, what's your value set, who you want to work for. Knowing your home state, trying it out with your home state is important, because they're going to know where you live, you're going to know who they are, they may know where you went to school if you went to school in that state, and that creates that connection. Because when I got my start, I started off as a staff assistant, which is a glorified name for a receptionist, and the very first question that came out of people's mouths when they walk through that front door is, so where are you from in Maine? Right? So if I had said, well, actually, I'm from Boston, that might have elicited a different reaction. But I could say, no, I'm from Lewiston. Oh, and then where did you go to college? And then I could say, oh, I went to Bates. So it creates that connection with all of the people coming into the office of, yes, I'm from your state. I understand the issues. I'm here working for my home senator, and I'm trying to do the best that I can for the people back in the state of Maine, or wherever that state might be. And I think that is, infinitely the most important part. So, again, knowing your value set, knowing what you believe. That doesn't mean you have to know it, that you have to form all of your belief systems at 22 years old, because we all know that, once we get older, things change, or at least we think, we could look at things differently. But having a really good sense of you and where you fit in and how you can help your senator, your congressman, really advance what they're trying to do for your constituents.
That's great. I'm going to just check really quickly. Katie, Heather, Christian, any questions that you have that you'd like to ask Sally about her career? Go ahead, Katie.
So I heard you, Sally, talk very passionately about corporate social responsibility. How does your leadership at Blackbaud view your job and what you do? I mean, do they view it really as, I hate to say this so crudely, but do they view it as like a mission essential or just good PR? Go ahead.
Honestly, it's mission essential. We've rolled out a number of new initiatives this year that we would not have we wouldn't have been able to otherwise if it hadn't been mission essential. So, our work is with nonprofit organizations, family and corporate foundations, corporate giving programs. These are people who are in the CSR space every single day. So for us to not have a robust CSR program, we kind of can't sort of walk the walk, so to speak. How do we go out into the market and work with nonprofit customers or foundation customers or corporate giving programs and not do any of these things ourselves? So, but at the same time, the interesting piece is we have more than 30,000 nonprofit customers, all with different missions and goals, and in different aspects. It could be animal rights, it could be education, it could be literacy, it could be healthcare. So that's sort of where our employee centered focus comes from, is the fact that I can't go out and say, well, Blackbaud is going to decide to focus all of our efforts on issue X and not focus efforts on anything else, and not alienate either some of our employees or some of our customer base or others within that nonprofit sector. So we really do focus on building up the work that our people are already doing in their communities. We send people to volunteer. We just launched Matching Gifts. We have our new Blackbaud Care Center. I wouldn't have Blackbaud Care Center or Matching Gifts without the support of leadership, because obviously, they need to fund the program, and if they don't think the program's worthwhile, then it's not going to be funded. So that's how or at least that's how we look at things. It's part of our engagement policy, it's part of how we give back to our communities, and it's part of our story back into the market.
When you interact with peers who are also in this space of corporate social responsibility or corporate citizenship or community engagement, do you see that your role at Blackbaud is pretty typical, or do you think because of this, like you said, your clients are kind of the same kind of people, that maybe Blackbaud's a little bit ahead, not to pat yourselves on the back, but is this pretty typical for corporate social responsibility, or maybe on the maybe more engaged side of that?
I think our philosophy is just ever so slightly different, and I'll sort of elaborate on that in a little bit. I think, one of the things that I've discovered in traveling in these CSR circles is that we have 3,000 employees across the globe. And so I will run into someone from Citibank or Target or Dell or any of these other larger corporations, and really one of the things that strikes me is you can accomplish a lot even as a smaller corporation. So you don't have to be a big multinational company to really achieve success or move the needle in this particular area. And going back to sort of part of your original question, I think from my perspective it gives us a little bit more insight, and one of the things that I've vowed to our nonprofit partners is when our team is, say, sourcing a volunteer opportunity for a group of associates who want to go out and volunteer. One of the things I've told my nonprofit friends is I will never call you up and say, I need a volunteer opportunity for 20 people for 2 hours and they can't get dirty. So, and if one of our teams comes to us with that request, we push back and say, okay, is 2 hours really enough time? Can you carve out some more? You can't get dirty really, so maybe we need to look at doing this at a different time. Because we really want to make sure that when we work with an organization on a project like this, that it's as beneficial for our people as it is beneficial for the organization. It needs to be that win-win, because we don't want the organization to go out and spend X number of hours on a project that's going to gain them this much, right? And I think that at times is maybe where sort of my views sort of separate ever so slightly from some of my other CSR colleagues, is I have that understanding of the sector, and I really want, not that everyone doesn't want to do what's best for the sector, but we really want to make sure that we're not putting any undue burden on an organization that we're partnering with simply to get a group of employees out volunteering, or to do this particular grant award, or to do something else. We really want to make sure that it's beneficial to both of us.
Yeah, I think it's so important because I think for on the nonprofit side, many of them feel kind of obligated to create this 2-hour opportunity where people can read and take the picture with the children, and it means nothing towards their mission, but they need the funding, they need the board member, they need the stakeholder in their mission, and so they're afraid to say, well, that doesn't work for us. So the fact that Blackbaud is kind of forward thinking, or that at least you're pausing, I think is so important to kind of understanding the role of corporations involvement in, particularly around volunteer engagement.
Exactly. Or it's the joke about the wall in the school that gets painted 10 times a year because they need to find a project for, the corporate volunteers to come in and do. And we never want to put any of our partners in that position where they feel obligated to create an opportunity for us just because of who we are and the fact that we may have funded them at some point or have a volunteer relationship with them. We really want it to be mutually, it has to be. It's not that we want to be. It really has to be mutually beneficial for both them and us.
So I know there's never such thing as a typical day, but for someone who's trying to understand, like, what will my lifestyle or my life look like if I'm manager of philanthropy and volunteer engagement at a mid-sized company in the South? What would that happen to look like for you?
So it could, because of, I have, a broad range of responsibilities. It could start with, working with our corporate citizenship coordinator on sourcing opportunities for a particular group. It could be, working with her on our upcoming Charleston Site Service Day. It could be talking with colleagues in a different location about our Community Matters Grants program and how they're scoring the applications and what to look for in a grant and how to look at, a nonprofit balance sheet and statement of activities and understand what they're saying. It could be working through some matching gift guidelines. It could be talking with an employee who wants to serve on a nonprofit board, has some passions, but doesn't know which organizations in their community might be a good fit. What else do I do? There's a little bit of reading. I do try to read about, the different trends in CSR so I can keep up on what's going on. Then there's also the focus on our current programming. What is it? Do we go deep in some ways? Do we broaden out in something else? Now that we have our coordinator role is a relatively new role for us. We just brought her on in April. And so that really has freed me up to look more broadly at what we offer in terms of our programming. Does it still fit within the company's scope and mission of what we want to do through our CSR? And if it does, then I'll use Camp Blackbaud for an example, which is what you and I, you probably remember about Camp Blackbaud, which is our product development camp that we work through for 5th graders. We've done it 3 years in a row now in Charleston. I just launched it 2 months ago in Austin. So thanks. So that's like a part of scaling, and then also, what is next for Camp Blackbaud? What else can we fit under that STEM umbrella, and what does it mean? Is it 2 camps a year in Charleston and Austin? Is it putting in, field trips for high school students from underserved schools to come in and see what our people do and to hear about tech careers? Is it taking Camp Blackbaud in a different direction, maybe in an after-school program? What are all of our options, and, what does the next generation of our STEM programming look like? So that's something that I get to work on as well, and that's been a lot of fun for me.
Yeah, and for anyone who doesn't know anything about Camp Blackbaud, it's a great program. We had you present in our conference in 2013 about the work that you're doing, and you can also see the hangout with Sally and I. We'll put that in YouTube as a post so that you can see. So, I know you have an MBA, and, often we see kind of people shift in this position from other positions within the organization, maybe a marketing position or another kind of business-based focus. Particularly for our organization and our internship, our interns come from a lot of the liberal arts and right now we have several social workers. I'm a social worker. I have my MSW. And so how would you say, particularly for those not from an MBA program, how should they shift into this role, or how can they prepare themselves to be considered for these types of opportunities?
I think that, in all honesty, I could do this job without my MBA. I think the nice part about this is that my MBA got me on that track to get into a role like this, but it's not, integral from my day-to-day. It just, it was something that I did for my own professional development, and it benefited me greatly by helping me move into the next level for the company. So that's really what it is. I think for most CSR professionals, the key part is being part of really the company you're already working with, knowing the culture, knowing the priorities, understanding how CSR fits into their day-to-day are really the key pieces. It is very rare, unless someone has previous CSR experience and they've jumped to a different company for a higher level position. It is very rare to come across a CSR professional with a company who didn't start in the company somewhere else.
That's very interesting to know.
So it's sort of like you already come in knowing, the priorities, the culture, what's important, and the people. I mean, that's the, I think one of the questions on that you supplied and talked about the traits of a professional, and one of the things that I do every day is I collaborate. I cannot do this on my own. I'm almost like a chief instigator, or a catalyst, however you want to put it, to get my people engaged. And so to do that, I need to work across all aspects of the company. And so I need to understand. I was in a meeting early today talking about a STEM activity that we're working on, and we were talking about whether we pull in some folks from our finance team. And so it's next week, on the 30th and the 1st. Well, guess what? It's month end and quarter end. So I'm not going to pull in, folks from that particular team, because they're going to be up to their eyelashes, closing our books for the month and the quarter. So understanding sort of what, the schedules of the different teams, understanding, the personalities within it, the leadership styles, that really is a big piece of what we do every day.
Yeah. So I get that. That definitely makes sense, particularly because CSR comes so much, particularly for your organization, out of the employees and understanding kind of what does your organization do and your mission. But I can also see how that creates a huge barrier for people who maybe have, like you, a background in something other than business. You spent so much time on the Hill, and then you look and say, a lot of this is transferable to this type of work, having to interact with the community, having to figure out stakeholder engagement with your work. But you maybe, if you hadn't worked for Blackbaud, maybe you just don't have any corporate experience. Do you feel like there is any opportunity there? Or if so, is it taking a kind of entry-level position somewhere in the company so that when an opportunity arises, you're kind of open to that? You know enough about the company that maybe that might make sense?
I think so. I mean, I also think having having a nonprofit background and understanding the sector, or having a sense of understanding the needs of a respective community can be very helpful, because not everyone in that business is going to have that visibility into the experience of a nonprofit organization, or what a child who's struggling with reading might be seeing on a day in and day out basis, and how do you help them solve that problem, or how do you work with an organization that is trying to solve that problem. So I think looking at it from that perspective is, yes, knowing the company is important, but I've also seen people actually more advanced in their careers who have been on the other side. They've been in the nonprofit sector, and they've moved over to the corporate side because the corporations wanted sort of additional visibility into their grant making, and having someone from the nonprofit side who understands sort of what to look for in a strong organization, outcomes, funding, balance sheet, all of that, is helpful as well. So you either see it. I don't see as many folks from the nonprofit side as maybe I think I would, versus those who've been in the company and understand the culture. But I think you can have both.
Yeah, I think that's probably limited. There's just small opportunities. Most corporations probably have maybe one or two CSR staff that aren't marketing staff.
I mean, our team. Yeah, I mean, our team is small. We've got 3 people, and we just brought the second person on in April after 7 years. So there tend to be small teams to begin with. So unless you're, I mean, I have a good friend who works for a much larger company, and even their team is relatively small. So it's not normally an area of the company that is overstaffed. I mean, not that any companies have areas that are overstaffed, but you're really not going to see that on the CSR team.
Right, that makes sense. Just want to, once again, Christian, Heather, Katie, do you have any questions before I monopolize the whole conversation? And if there are any questions from the audience, feel free to type them. We'll try and answer them on the screen. So how do you feel your work makes a difference in social issues or social good? How do you feel like, I know you said even that you feel like you do good every day, and it's a continuation of pretty much what is a mission for you. How do you feel that impact?
So I think really for me it's serving as that catalyst for our people and for our community. So it's working with my colleagues on volunteer opportunities, board service, helping them understand the nonprofit landscape wherever they might live. And then on the flip side, you have the whole grant making piece that we do, where we really create committees of employees who are not only granting money to organizations that are worthy of those grants, but then they're also learning what it means to be a grant maker. And because they then get a different sense of that nonprofit experience, they even become better Blackbaud employees and understand more about how they do what they do every day and how it makes a difference. So I like to look at it in terms of the cycle is, yes, we're granting out money, and when we ask an organization if they reapply for a grant, we ask them, so what went well, what didn't go well, how was the grant money used in terms of the program that you applied for. There's also this sort of opportunity for our people to learn what it's like and to see the nonprofit experience firsthand. In some of our larger offices, the grant making process includes site visits. So they're getting out of the office, they're going to organizations, they're talking with their leadership, they're asking them questions about their programming, about their strategic planning, about their board giving. So they're getting this nice full picture of an organization and how it's achieving its mission as well. So we sort of look at it as, or I look at it as, investing in our people, making sure that they have the skills or the desire or the resources to go out and volunteer in their community, investing in nonprofit organizations through our grants and through our nonprofit, through our Blackbaud board members and other activities, and then encouraging philanthropy and service by some of the incentives that we have in place to get our people to give back, either through matching gifts or volunteer for vacation. So and now that we have our new Blackbaud Care Center tracking program, we can actually now do a deeper dive into some of the numbers and really see sort of what our people are interested in, which teams are volunteering more than others, what sites, might need a little bit more attention than a different one. And so it's really going to allow us to have a more robust view across the company of how we're giving back and how our people are engaged.
Right. And do you feel like people who are on the nonprofit side who want to connect with corporations, do you feel like they should directly try to build this network of people who are in CSR? Do you feel like there's some ways, I know Blackbaud does this really great way, like we said, at preparing people for nonprofit leadership, but Blackbaud isn't everywhere. So how would you suggest for nonprofits who want to engage either corporate social responsibility staff or corporations, how do you think they should do that?
you know, in one way, I actually think organizations need to look at us as if they would an individual donor. So how do you cultivate your individual donors? What is it that you know, how many touches do you have? You know, when do you reach out to them? How often do you ask? What are the other opportunities that you give them to be engaged? And I think it's very similar with us. So, you know, are you a grantee? You know, are we volunteering with you? Do we have people volunteering with you on their own time? Are you getting some of these, you know, incentive opportunities like matching gifts or reward your passion grants from our people because you've engaged them in your organization and its mission? So those are the different, you know, I sort of look at it that way, because if you can get our people engaged and it sort of bubbles up to the top, and then we hear about it and we find out that, oh, not only is person X involved, but person Y and Z are also involved, then how does that organization then become part of sort of our circle, so to speak, right? And we know our people are engaged with this organization. They may end up applying for a grant because they've been forwarded the application. You know, I'll kind of give you a very small example from Austin. So we had an organization apply to us in last year's grant cycle for one of our Community Matters grants. They happened to win the grant. It was for a camp program that they were doing called Code Chica. It's an organization that works with Latina teens and tweens. And so when it came time for us to decide that we were going to grow Camp Blackbaud to Austin, well, guess who I reached out to? I reached out to Latinitas, who we already had a relationship with, who I knew was doing STEM programming with girls only. And so we did Camp Blackbaud with Latinitas, and now, you know, our customer conference is going to be in Austin next month, and we're wrapping them into that experience as well. So there's working with a corporation, just like working with an individual donor, it's more than just the money. So it's more than just wanting that corporate sponsorship or buying the table or the grant or whatever it might be. It's how do you engage with the organization or the corporation holistically so that you can get sort of you know, more support than you might normally get if the company just wrote you a check.
Right.
You know, that's sort of how you look at it. You have to look at the company as an entire package, just like you would a donor. How does the company then become your advocate because you've engaged with them in one way? So they were a grantee. Latinitas is now, you know, we worked with them for Camp Blackbaud. We're now a pretty big advocate for them. And so how does that translate going in? Well, it opens up more doors and it creates more opportunity.
Right. And, you know, you all want to also make your jobs a little bit easier. You kind of qualified this organization as a great partner, as a great organization. And so often, I'm sure you all get tons of applications from people that you're kind of unsure or not knowing where that those resources will go. And so if you can start with something small like volunteer engagement or instead of just immediately going to the grant, there's a way for people to understand your culture and your work a little bit more, I'm sure, in some ways. The other piece, you and I think our worlds overlapped a little bit from the Billion Plus Change campaign, and looking at pro bono volunteerism and volunteer engagement is such a big part of your role. For smaller companies, for people who maybe are employed with a tiny, you know, consulting firm or a tiny think tank, and they don't have some kind of stronger corporate social responsibility initiative, what are some ways that you think they might be able to engage employees or think about creating ways to connect with their community?
So one of the, you know, again, one of the premises of our, you know, CSR programming is the fact that what we do through our CSR connects the company, connects our people to the brand in a way that is separate from their day-to-day activity. So we're elevating sort of our brand in their minds, and also hopefully in the minds of others in the community. And one of the things that you can do, I mean, it's not difficult to participate in a citywide service day. it is not difficult to maybe do, especially from a consulting perspective, do a little bit of pro bono work. You know, can you assign a consultant, I don't know, 2, 3 hours, 5 hours a month to work on a pro bono nonprofit project? You know, I'll use the example of Create-a-thon, which was founded by Teresa Riggs and her firm in Columbia, and it's now exploded to all over the country, where organizations apply to a marketing firm to create collateral and different types of marketing materials and graphics and logos and web pages and all of that. And so they apply. You know, if they're accepted, then, you know, Teresa and her teams then, and teams all across the country, then work, you know, overnight to create all these marketing campaigns or programs for these particular organizations. And then the organizations come in and say, you know, this is what we've done. And so there are different creative and unique opportunities for people to engage. It doesn't have to be, yes, you can go out and certainly paint, you can go out and dig in the dirt and plant plants and all that other stuff, but you can be creative, especially within the skills-based and the pro bono world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, our organization, we do one free capacity building client engagement at least for every consultant, and we're super tiny, so it's something that every company can do. I just think they have to be thinking about it, and it doesn't have to be that it's a big part, but it just should be planned and organized.
Right. It needs to be intentional, right? It's, you know, what are the different things that you are going to do, that you're going to undertake as a company to make sure that you know, the impact is what you want it to be, and that your employees are supported through the process.
So we're getting to the end. I just want to make sure that we get maybe a few more questions. And one of the things, Katie, I'm going to kind of pick on your experience. I was thinking about this when you were talking about the public policy and working on the Hill and having this kind of where are you from, where did you go to college experience. And my family is from a U.S. territory, and so we don't have a huge amount of representation on the Hill. And then Katie's a military spouse, and I know that we have several interns who are veterans who maybe their families are moving quite often. For those young people who maybe they don't have such an ingrained experience in a community but are really interested in working on the Hill, or on the other side of this kind of CSR, they're not, as in they've been moving a lot, so they don't have this kind of community experience. What are some things you think they could do to strengthen their application or their conversation, because they kind of are mobile in that way?
Wow, that's a tough question. I think how I would sort of turn it around is that they've been in so many different communities that they're not necessarily wedded to one particular philosophy, idea, or a way of doing something. So they have the opportunity or the privilege of being in so many different communities that they can see potentially how community A attacked childhood hunger in one way, and community B tried it this way, and community C tried it that way, and that there's no real one way of solving any particular societal issue or working towards solving a particular societal issue. So you bring perspective from your travels and from experiencing other cultures and living in different communities, and maybe having just a better understanding of what it, you know, of, I guess in some ways, being, not that they're, you know, being that outsider looking in and understanding, sort of looking at a community from this level versus in the nitty-gritty level, and seeing it for what it is, and then being able to take all of those experiences and digest them and create their own, I guess, philosophy in order to sort of move societal change forward.
That makes sense. You know, moving gives you as much perspective as staying put,
right?
And so, being able to add that. We did have a question from the audience of: do you consider your CSR program a way to attract and retain talent, especially with millennials? And do you think that's something that's important to maybe younger employees, or do you see a difference between that with your older employees?
So the short answer, yes. longer answer is, we do an employee volunteerism survey about every other year or so, and one of the questions that we ask on the survey is how much of a role did the fact that Blackbaud works with nonprofits play in your decision to come work for the company? And in our last survey that we did, about 84% of our people answered that it was a very important part of their reason for coming to work for us was the fact that we worked with nonprofits. And I think what we're seeing is that people are driven to this more purposeful work, and we're looking at different ways on how we sort of ingrain that purpose throughout the entire organization. And I think our CSR activities certainly play a role in that. They certainly play a role in engagement and retention. And I think sort of going back to, how does this play with, employees of other generations, I think that 84% speaks to that. Those were, employees across the organization. And then we also have our folks, especially our millennials, participate in Achieve's Millennial Impact Survey. So for the last couple of years, we've had the privilege of having our millennials participate in that survey, and so we've gotten some really great data from that. And of course, part of that is they too feel this purpose around what it is that we do and appreciate the fact that our work with nonprofits drives change every day, and it really does resonate with them. But I also think, looking at all of our people, it resonates with everybody.
Yeah. I think people like the idea that they can combine their personal passion, and I think, the growth in your employee match will probably increase that,
Absolutely.
As well as the ability to not only, again, I'm going to shout out your leadership program. I think every company should do this, that, I can serve on the board for the opera or for my school, my kids' charter school or whatever, and you'll help me to be better at that.
Right.
I think, that is such a key thing, and knowing that it's encouraged and supported, and then, just with social media making awareness of so much, you want to be able to say that you work for a good company when people ask you. You don't want to be the hated company, and so it makes it a lot easier to say, I work at Blackbaud and we do great things in the community, than to be the people that kind of have a negative slant on their work. So any last questions from the three of you before I ask my final question? I just want to make sure I give that space. Heather, go ahead.
Hi, Sally. I think it's lovely and interesting that you've had the perspective of working on the Hill, working in policy, and then having the opportunity to work more intimately with philanthropy. I'm just wondering, having that perspective, what do you see as, what's your view of philanthropy, and how do you feel like it really makes a difference, maybe where public policy might fail?
So in a couple ways, I think really in order for us to create lasting change, it needs to be a mix of government, nonprofit, business. All three really need to work together. No one is going to solve any of our issues on their own. They're just too complex, too large. And one of my my soapbox issues right now is that from a nonprofit perspective, advocacy needs to now become part of their landscape. They can't really just sort of sit back and look at what's going on either on a local, state, or federal level and saying, you know what, we really don't have a role to play in this. It's not our fight. Well, but it's everybody's fight. And I think what you're seeing is, even with some foundations, even funding some advocacy efforts, is that, if you are working to change some particular aspect about your community, either be it childhood hunger or homelessness or whatever it might be, and there are active public policy issues, statements, laws on the books, whatever that might be, that actually get in your way, you're never going to be able to achieve what you're trying to achieve if those don't change. So I think really at this point it becomes, an organization's responsibility to advocate for themselves as much as it becomes those of us who are their donors or their volunteers or whatnot to advocate for them as well. Meeting with their elected officials, working through and any sort of, associations for nonprofits where nonprofit issues can be heard and can be talked about. I think what we saw a few years ago when the charitable tax deduction was actually put on the table of being capped, it took a lot of folks by surprise. Well, why would they do that? We've never had this, issue before. Why would they even consider capping a charitable tax deduction? What will that do to our donations? And I think that made people realize that they need to be aware of the policy discussions that are taking place, and they need to have their voice, and they need to find their voice.
Yeah, I love that idea of collaboration. Is that something that you saw when you were working on the Hill, of nonprofit organizations advocating for themselves, or is this something that you're hoping will come up in the near future?
In some of the larger, more federated organizations, the large, the large organizations that have chapters across the United States. You'll see everybody will have their national convention or so. It'll be in Washington, and they all come up to the Hill, and so they have their appointments with their staff. And I think that's key part of education, really. So what is advocacy? Advocacy is education. It's educating your elected officials about the issues that are important to your organization and how you're trying to change your little corner of the world. It's a little bit more difficult for those, who might be smaller, more grassroots, things like that. But I think even just an awareness of the issues that are out there and how they might affect your particular organization is at least a step in that direction.
And it may be that the smaller grassroots organizations, one of our key pillars is collaboration. And that if you're the small guy that's looking at disability, don't just sit on your own, but work with every other organization in your state that's looking at the same issue to raise awareness, and work together to raise awareness, rather than just assuming that I'm too small or I'm too local, no one's going to care. That your whole state, you represent, constituents that they will care about if you collaborate. And I think, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that, when I do these little talks every so often that I stress is that we're all someone's constituent. And I hope that the people in the room are at a minimum voting. Right? So that they're at least voting in a way that makes sense either for their organization, their organization's mission, or for their own, value set. But, that really is a key part of that, is just being aware and understanding how the process works and being a part of the process so that you can act, or it can at least maybe hopefully say thank you when something good happens before you have to go to an elected official and ask for something when you're concerned that something bad is going to happen.
Absolutely. Any last questions before I ask my final question? All right, great. So what is the one piece of advice you would give to someone, and you can choose, I guess, maybe in either your public policy role or your work on the Hill, or in your current role at Blackbaud? What was one piece of advice you would give for someone who's looking to work in this field? Or maybe both.
Wow. Wow, that's a good one. I guess be persistent and persevere, because it's, as small as the teams are in CSR, and sometimes those jobs can be difficult to come by, so can the jobs on the Hill. And it's really about making those connections and working through your networks and your contacts to try to find that best way to achieve your goals. And so I think understanding who you are, understanding your value set, connecting with your networks, and then just plain old perseverance. That's 4 pieces versus the 1 piece that you asked for. But
hey, that's fine. They all fit together.
I think that's the way that you can work through that process and achieve your goals.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Sally, and to my team for joining us, and for those of you that watched live or asked questions. We're really excited about this series and getting a chance to highlight the ways that people end up where they are in their journey through their career. And Sally, it's so great to have you as kicking off this series. It will continue. We're going to skip October, but we'll be starting again in November, and we already have the whole calendar confirmed through April of 2016. So we look forward to hearing many more people share a little bit about where they've gone or where they've ended up. If you're interested in adding yourself or someone you know in your network to the series, go to sistergroup.org/career series, and you can email those names, and we'll be happy to follow up. But thank you again, Sally, so much for your time on this, and thank you everyone for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Thanera.